Today we conclude the story, our study of the birth of Christ. In our last session, we looked in the early part of Luke chapter 2 at the culmination of all these things we've been talking about, the culmination of God's planning and all the prophecies when Jesus was actually born there in Bethlehem. We get the details, some details about Mary wrapping him in swaddling clothes and lying him in a feed trough that where animals had lived or possibly still living. And then the story suddenly jumps there in the middle part of Luke chapter 2 to some shepherds who are out in the field. We think of shepherds because of all the great things said about Jesus as the good shepherd, chief shepherd, great shepherd of the sheep, and shepherds, pastors. That's the word pastors literally means shepherds who are also elders in the church. All that tied together. We have this rather noble view of shepherds today, but in that day in Palestine, the shepherds, that was a very menial task and sort of the entry level task. In fact, I've read recently that even sometimes it was the ex-convicts who were trying to get back into society who worked their way up by starting out as lowly shepherds. In the character of God, the humility of God that we've seen throughout this whole story, it was shepherds who were first told about this birth. Imagine out there in the middle of the night, you're trying to stay awake. I don't know how cold it was, but at least chilly. And you're just not expecting anything dramatic to happen. Let's just get through this night. And an angel appears, and it says the glory of the Lord shone round about them. And the angel announces the birth, talks about glad tidings, good news. The word there, good news, as it occurs in our Bibles, is the same word from which we get gospel. So the gospel was first announced to these shepherds, believe it or not. Now the gospel's been announced to many people since then, but not only did the shepherd tell them about the birth of this child and how they could go into town and find him, but it says a host or a multitude of angels appeared. I always used to think that maybe that was 100, 200, maybe even 1,000 angels, but I have a different idea, concept, a view of it now. Angels had anticipated these things just like the prophets, and obviously it's been in God's mind for forever about this birth that's going to happen. But what if, this is me just thinking out loud, what if that night the word gets around heaven and Jesus is going to be born on the earth finally, and that night heaven empties out and all the angels of heaven come down, and not just a few hundred singing the praises to God, but from horizon to horizon, this way and that, the whole sky is filled with millions of angels. The event itself would warrant such an outpouring of praise and glory. And as they sing, and we have these famous words, the traditional words are that they sang, "Glory to God in the highest, peace on earth, goodwill towards men." And that sort of left a lot of people confused because peace on earth did not automatically happen. Wars didn't cease. Jesus said they wouldn't cease. There's been a lot of strife ever since he's here. And yet we reach back. We studied earlier from Isaiah about how he'd be the Prince of Peace. So what does that mean? Really, the best translation is glory to God in the highest, peace on earth and goodwill towards men upon whom God's favor rests. And you can do some study on that, but that's really it. In other words, as grace is extended to people, as people in faith respond to that grace and become Christians, that's where the peace occurs. And that's the way it's still happening to this day. Not the cessation of wars. There will be a time for that, yes. But now the peace that he's talking about, the peace that those angels sang about, is a peace that's in the heart. That's the peace I want to leave with you as we conclude this study. Seek the peace that means you're right with God, that warfare, that alienation from God, all of that has ceased, and now you have that peace in your heart through a relationship with God that's through Jesus Christ, the one who was born in this humble but glorious fashion, the birth of Christ. Have a great holiday. Have a great year. Continue to listen for opportunities. We'll be offering other studies coming up, particularly written studies. Thank you for joining us.